Yeah, I'll do that. Thank you very much indeed, Group Captain Vijay Kumar, and thank you to the Madras Management Association and the Madras Institute of Development Studies for inviting me to share my thoughts with you. I'm very grateful that the first launch of the book is taking place in Chennai. The book was released only a month ago in Delhi, and the book has not yet been released and launched in Delhi. So I'm very, very grateful to you for bringing me together, and grateful also to my good friend Praveen Chakrabarti, the newly anointed Rajya Sabha member from Tamil Nadu, which I want to congratulate him about. Mr. Giridhar Gopal, thank you very much for inviting me. Dr. Kumaraswamy, Dr. Kalai, my young friend. So let me begin by saying a few words about I won't speak for more than 20 minutes and leave much of the discussion to when you ask questions. The book is motivated by the challenge that actually Mr. Gopal was talking about. The challenge is not just that India should be growing fast. We are told that India is growing fast, but is it generating the number of jobs that India needs to generate? That's the reason why I begin by saying that, first of all, there is an economic crisis, a structural economic crisis, which I will speak about. The jobs are not being created at the rate at which they need to be created. At the same time, I argue that the education sector is generating young people who are by and large unemployable in large numbers. And the employment crisis, which is the third crisis, so I call this a polycrisis of the economy, of the education system, and of employment. The polycrisis and the employment crisis is a result essentially of the economic and structural crisis, slowing growth and the pattern of growth, and the systemic education crisis. That's why the book argues that we need to rethink India's growth story. So, in a sense, you're already getting the structure of my presentation, so I'm going to move very rapidly through these three themes very, very quickly. So we are constantly given the narrative that India is growing very fast, that India is supposedly the fastest growing large economy in the world. That's already being questioned, whether India is the fastest growing large economy. I won't go into the details. If you ask me why, I will explain. But for the moment, you have to go by my word, which is what we argue, that if we are going to become Vikasita Bharat, India has to grow at nothing short of 8% per annum. And we are actually, over the last 10 or 12 years, despite supposedly growing fast, we've only been growing at about 6.2% per annum. That means we are still already 1.8 percentage points lower than what's warranted to become Viksit Bharat. And we've got to grow at 8% per annum annually for 22 to 25 years. Please try and understand that. Moving on, if we don't, then we will run up against what is called the middle income trap. So, and please appreciate the following, that none of the international agencies, independent international agencies, the World Bank, IMF, none of them project India's growth will be greater than 6.5% at least until 2030. That suggests quite clearly that the growth rate will be still way below the warranted rate, the 8% that we are talking about, which we estimate. But the tragedy is that we are not generating enough jobs, partly because we are not growing fast enough. This is in complete contrast to the situation that prevailed between 2003-04 and about 14-15, when we were growing at 8% per annum, on average, over a 10 or 11-year period, and we were generating 7.5 million new non-farm jobs each year. Please keep that in mind in the background as we move forward. And please also never forget that we might be the fifth or sixth largest economy in the world, but our per capita income puts us at 147th rank. 147th rank in the world. So let's just keep that in mind. We are the only low middle income country among the G20 countries. All others are high income or upper middle income countries. So at the same time, please appreciate that the data is demonstrating beyond a shadow of doubt, that wealth and income inequality in a highly socially unequal country as it is, has actually increased sharply, so sharply that India is now, in terms of wealth and income, one of the most unequal countries in the world, comparable to countries like Brazil and South Africa. They are the most unequal. We are now, as Piketty says, more unequal than 100 years ago under the British Raj. Just keep these facts in mind. This is a process that has been going on for the last 40 years. So, when I say that the economy is in a structural crisis, what am I saying? I am saying the following, that there was until 2015-16, a process of structural change taking place. Structural change essentially means the following, that as per capita income grows, you also have the following two processes going along. One process involves a change of the structure of the economy away from agriculture dependence towards industry and services, and also a change in the structure of employment away from agriculture into industry and services. Why? Because with development, people want to move out of agriculture, they want to move to higher productivity activities in industry and services where incomes are higher. And if that happens, that's what drives the per capita income forward. Now, you would expect, therefore, that in that process, the contribution of manufacturing, which is the dominant part of industry, will be rising as a proportion of GDP, right? But look what this graph is showing. For 25 years after the economic reforms began, all the way until 2011-12, that's the first point that you're seeing at the beginning. You have a laser pointer? If you give me the laser pointer, the first data point there is 2011-12. It's at 17% or so. After that, it systematically declines. The contribution of manufacturing actually falls, and in the year 23-24, which is that last data point, you are seeing that it falls to 14.3%. Never in India's history has manufacturing share in gross value added, from 17 to 14% in the year 23-24. Never in India's modern economic history has the share of manufacturing to gross value added actually declined to this level. And at the same time, please appreciate, manufacturing employment falls in absolute terms, which I will show you now in this graphic, in this table. Please look at the following. Manufacturing share of workers, manufacturing number of workers. In 11-12, what you're seeing is 60 million workers, and that number drops all the way to 55 million in 17-18. That's the year, by the way, that the open unemployment rate in the economy was supposed to be already reached the highest level in 45 years. The highest in 45 years in 17-18, well before COVID. Please appreciate. Moving on, it has caught up it has caught up to about 63 million or so, just over what it was 10 years earlier. So in other words, share of GVA falling in manufacturing, despite all the talk about Make in India, about performance-linked incentive, etc. But it's not just that. It's much worse than that. This is the opposite of the structural change that I was talking about. What is the other dimension of this? It's the following, that in the last 5 years, you've seen not only the share of agriculture go up, you want to see with development the share of agriculture dropping, the absolute number of workers in agriculture dropping. What are you seeing here? The numbers were dropping from 2004-05 when it was 269, it drops to 200 million, right? 200 million in the year 2018-19. And then look what happens. In the next 4 or 5 years, it goes up by 80 million, from 200 to 280 million. The absolute opposite of structural change. That's why I call it the reversal of structural change. This is called structural retrogression. This is not Vikas. This is the opposite of Vikas. Okay? So on the one hand, manufacturing coming down. On the other hand, agriculture going up. Moving on. So in other words, point one, big point one, is that the structural economic crisis is that manufacturing coming down and agriculture employment rising. The government actually had the audacity to tell us that in the last 4 years we've created 8 crore jobs or 80 million jobs. What they didn't tell you, those jobs were in agriculture. That's the opposite of what you want to see happen. Our educated young don't want to be working in farming. Our educated girls are not going to go back to agriculture. They want to get the hell out of agriculture, not work in agriculture. But look what's happening. Moving on, and one last sentence about this. Never in the history of the world, let alone of the history of India, have 80 million workers been added to agriculture in a matter of 4 or 5 years. Moving on. What is the meaning of this? The implication of this is the following. That when jobs were growing at the rate of 7.5 million per annum, when we were growing at 8% per annum, right? You recall until 14, 15, as I was saying, then real wages were rising. Look at the numbers here. 4, 5 to 11, 12. Here are the numbers. This is what? Real wages in rural India. They were rising when jobs were rising in the non-farm sector. Then what happens? From 17, 18, this is what happens with real wages. Flat real wages. For 10 years, you've seen flat real wages. This is in rural India. Moving on. In urban India, this is the situation in urban India. Because non-farm jobs were growing in an earlier period, I was saying real wages were rising, and that's exactly what you're seeing here. You're seeing real wages rising for regular salaried casual workers as well as the self-employed earnings, right? And then real wages stagnate. So on the one hand, jobs stop growing. On the other hand, real wages stagnate over a long period of time. What is going to be the implication of this? Because this is what happens when non-farm jobs don't grow. Real wages stagnate. That's what happens when structural change, which was going on, is actually reversed. This is what happens. And this is what the data is showing. Moving on very rapidly in the interest of time, please appreciate that as the young join in larger and larger numbers looking for work after getting much better educated, what we've seen in the last, let's say 20 years happen is a massification of higher education. I can tell you the numbers, I don't have the time to go into that at any length. If you ask me, I'll tell you the numbers. What do I mean by massification of higher education? With gender parity, please appreciate. So obviously these young are not looking for work in agriculture, they're looking for work outside agriculture, but the non-farm jobs are the ones which I was saying are not growing. So what are the 4 demographic groups which need to be provided jobs? Firstly, are of course the 15 to 29-year-old youth. Some 6 to 7 million at least are entering the labor force each year. We have to provide jobs, non-farm jobs for them. Within this group, of course, is a very large number of girls, because girls' enrollment in secondary education got universalized by about between 2010 and 2015. For secondary education, please appreciate, the result was upward pressure in higher education, and higher education today, not only the enrollment rate has risen to 29%, higher education, in a matter of 10 years going from 11%, it's happened with gender parity. And that's a fantastic achievement, but obviously these girls are going to look for non-farm jobs. But guess what? India has had the lowest female labor force participation rates in the world, comparable to those found in Saudi Arabia and in Yemen. Saudi Arabia and in Yemen, and not improving. Okay? These are all girls who have aspirations of finding work, obviously, in urban areas, in industry and modern services. You, living in Tamil Nadu, have to be very proud of the fact that 40% of all factory working women in the country are in Tamil Nadu. Okay? Yes, you can clap at that, but the point is, that's just still not good enough. Even for Tamil Nadu, because had it been good enough, you wouldn't have voted out a party which has been in power for the longest time. And who has voted them out? It's the young, whose aspirations are different, because obviously they've all gotten very... Can you imagine if the young in your state have new aspirations and are voting accordingly? Can you imagine what the situation in the rest of the country is? Because they have gotten educated even in the rural areas of Bihar, UP, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh. I can assure you, I'm a UP wala, and I can tell you that that's the truth. Okay, moving on very rapidly in the interest of time. There's, of course, the stock of those in the who are landless and small marginal farmers. We already know that in 2019, we already had 200 million workers in agriculture who were contributing only 16 to 17% to GDP, because that's the contribution of agriculture. We've now, thanks to the government's policy shocks to the economy, added 80 million workers to agriculture in the last 4 or 5 years. We've gone from 200 million to 280 million. And they're still contributing only 16% of GDP. That means we've got to pull out all these 80 million of workers out of agriculture, plus pull out more after we've taken the level of agriculture employment to 200 million. We have no choice but to pull them out, because if we don't, agricultural incomes will stagnate. If they stagnate, where will the demand for non-farm goods come from? So that's the stock of those who have to be pulled out of work into non-farm. Particularly this group needs to be accommodated in construction work. The third group, of course, consists of the stock of unemployed. The stock of unemployed in 2012 was only 10 million. This is the openly unemployed. I'm not talking about the underemployed. Okay? Not talking about those who've fallen out of the labor force and stopped looking for work. That number is already by 2019 tripled from 10 million to 30 million. So we have to employ those. When you take into account all these people, we have to generate nothing short of 11 to 12 million new non-farm jobs each year. And that cannot happen unless we grow at least 8% per annum. But how many jobs are we creating in the non-farm sector? Only 6 million. That's half of what the number that we need to create. That's why the open unemployment rate of youth is extremely high. Guess what it is? Here is the data. The youth unemployment rate, this is showing unemployment among the educated and trained. These are numbers going from 93, 94 all the way to 23, 24. Focus only on the 23, 24 number, let us say, and 17, 18 number. That's the most recent period, okay? Graduates. We are most interested, of course, in this room for graduates. Look at the number. It used to be in 11, 12, 20%. It went to 36%, even if it's down. And it's down only because many of these graduates are girls who have actually finding that they're not finding work and have actually joined agriculture. That's what they're showing. Agriculture is not work. And they've joined agriculture as unpaid family labor. Please try and appreciate this. Unpaid family labor. They're not remunerated. So this is what's happening to the unemployed. In the interest of time, I'm going to really move on. As though all this is not bad enough, the quality of our workforce is demonstrated in this last column here. This is the Indian workforce by level of education. In 23-24, already, 23% nearly were still illiterate. Another 19% only had primary education, and another 21% only had middle education. What does that mean? About 62% of our total workforce who are already working, they have less than 8 years of education. That's the nature of the workforce that our education system so far has created. This is one very important reason why I argued earlier on that the education system is still in crisis. Now, why this education crisis? I don't have the time to talk about it, so I'm going to move very rapidly to what a growth strategy could be, and this is my last slide, and I will stop, because I don't want to leave you with in a state of pessimism, because it is not that it is not possible to actually get out of this structural crisis and the jobs crisis. And we have no choice but to get out of it, and get out of it very fast, because we have only 15 years left for our demographic dividend to end. Let me just underline what that means, that statement means. Why is the dividend seen as such a once in a lifetime in the nation's history opportunity? Because this is the period in the life of any nation when the share of the working age population is rising and the share of the dependent population is falling. Dependents are under 15 and over 64, okay? The point is, this period is about to end in 15 years. Why? How do I know? We estimate this. You'll find all the numbers crunched in the book. But listen to this number. Currently, half of our workforce is already at the age of 45, over 45. That means in 15 years, they will be at retirement or beyond. Half. The implication is that we have to find pensions for them, death and disability insurance for them, social insurance that people in this room take for granted, but we are only 10% of the workforce. 90% of our workforce is informal, without any social security. And please don't tell me that Vikasit Bharat will have 90% of its workforce which doesn't have social security. Because every Vikasit Desh, every developed country has 100% social security. Everyone has social security. If we don't start working on it today, there is not a hope in hell that we will ensure that 0% of all our workers have social security. That means we might become an aging society, an elderly society, and like the Chinese leaders are saying today, Europe became old after they became rich. We have become old without becoming rich. The Chinese leaders whose country is at 2.5 to 3 times our per capita income today, and it will be much higher even now. Their dividend is over. Are we going to allow our dividend to be over? And yet, we have 90% of our workforce which is living longer because they will have higher longevity, life expectancy is rising, and we are spending only 1.3% of GDP on health and practically nothing on social security. What will happen to the elderly? Will they have to work until they drop dead? Therefore, we have no choice but to move towards this threefold strategy for jobs and I'm going to end with this slide. I have really crossed the 20 minutes that I was intending to speak. If you want me to spell this out, it's spelled out in the book. But, let me just spell it out in 3 sentences. 1, we have no choice but to invest in our agriculture in a way that we bring our growth rate of agriculture above the 3 to 4% that it has never exceeded in the last 75 years. Because that and that alone, the rise in productivity in agriculture will ensure that incomes will rise in agriculture, and as a result of which, demand for non-farm goods will grow, manufacturers will grow. So Tamil Nadu will become the manufacturing superpower of India and provide the goods for those manufactured goods for the rest of the country. But why just Tamil Nadu? Why not Telangana and Karnataka and the other states of India? But that happens only when rural demand increases. There is a whole strategy there in the book. I can't talk about it. Secondly, in 35 years, India has not had an industrial policy or a manufacturing strategy. Had we had one, our manufacturing contribution to gross value added would not have been at 17%. That was good enough. In the last 10, 12 years, it has come down to 14%. So clearly, we need a manufacturing strategy. We cannot simply be dependent upon our IT services exports. We cannot go from an agriculture-driven economy to be a services-driven economy and jump over or leapfrog over a period which China rode the wave of. All the East Asians rode the wave of. That's why they actually realized the demographic dividend, which we are failing to do. So the book spells out 7 components of an industrial policy. And finally, in the services sector, we think that our IT services is going to solve the problems. I'm not going to answer why it is not, and AI is only a very small part of the answer of that. But what we don't have today in the services sector is public investment in health, in education, in the state police, and in judiciary, which can create millions of jobs. Why do I say this is essential? Because we have per 1,000 population better number of government officials relative to total population in Tamil Nadu and southern states. But that's not the point. On average in India, we are literally one-fourth of the level of public officials, even in China or other emerging market economies, and only 1/10 that of rich countries. So, and please understand, in your state and in every state, health, education, and the police account for 85% of all state government officials. And half of those posts are vacant. No state, no country can actually continue to underfund its health, education, and the police and expect to become Viksit Bharat. Let me stop at that point. The argument goes well beyond that. I'd encourage you to have a look at the book. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Professor, for your thought-provoking insights. Now we come to the most awaited moment for the evening and the launch of the book and address by our chief guest. May I request you please do the step forward, do the honor to launch the books. Can I have the books, please?